Meanwhile, let's talk about vaping. Vaping is an extraordinary and hot topic that has been very much so at the fore in this last week. And in fact, there's been a split in the coalition about that. Now, Greg Hunt, the Health Minister, has, I think, been doing a first-rate job with his stewardship over the coronavirus period, has late this afternoon decided to put a pause on a plan to make vaping unlawful. And in fact, he's now going to take a few more soundings, understandably, because last night on Paul Murray's program, Matt Canavan, the terrific senator from Queensland, went to town. Have a look at what Matt Canavan had to say.
What we'd like to see is a safe, regulated market for vaping products in Australia, as exists in every other developed country in the world, except for Turkey and ourselves. We're the only two countries where e-cigarettes are not legal at the moment. And sure, yeah, you should ban some of the products that are clearly trying to be marketed to children. They should be banned. We don't want to see that. We want to see it made here in Australia, not have people import it from China and who knows where. Make it made here, sold here, maybe taxed here as well, so we could generate some revenue from it as well, like with smokes, and just have it much safer. But we're not in that system yet, and we'll just keep pushing the case.
Well, that was Matt Canavan with Paul Murray last night, and joining us from Perth is Dr Joe Kosterich, the writer, the blogger, the commentator, and also the pro-vaping man. It's good to have you with us, Dr Joe. Really, Matt Canavan might have actually solved the problem last night.
Absolutely, Gary. Look, lovely to be with you. Look, Matt Canavan was spot on, and certainly the intervention of himself and George Christensen, who started the petition, and I understand there were at least 28 backbenchers who signed a letter to the Health Minister, has brought about a change. And look, I think, really one has to thank the Health Minister for having listened. I think the original decision last Friday was a dreadful one. It would have condemned something in the order of 300,000 Australians who've quit smoking by vaping back into smoking. So, credit to Greg Hunt for having listened and said, look, this is more of an issue than I thought, and now he's delayed this till January 1. So it's certainly been a win for the people who support vaping and wanting to get smokers off combustible cigarettes. But we still have to make sure that Australia does join the rest of the free world, and we only have to look to New Zealand. New Zealand across the ditch has gone completely the right direction in this. They've made vaping as accessible as smoking. It's no harder to vape than it is to smoke. It's not promoted to children. It's only available to adults. It's not advertised. There is a very simple regime that can be introduced on this. The UK runs a similar regime. Greg Hunt, I think, unfortunately, has been badly advised by his department and also badly advised by a coterie in what people call big public health, who all agree with themselves and all think they know better than the rest of the world combined. Well, they don't.
And the extraordinary part for me, Joe, having chaired ministerial council meetings, it includes the New Zealand minister. So Australia has these ministerial council meetings, so you'd think that, again, I was talking earlier about our federation, you'd think that state health ministers and the New Zealand health minister and the Australian health minister would actually be talking about these issues, and the department would be put to work on what the minister thinks rather than the minister being put to work on what the department thinks.
Look, you would hope so. I often do get asked the question because of my interest in this space, and I should say that the reason I became interested in vaping was listening to patients. People coming in saying, "Look, Doc, I've managed to give up smoking," and this was about 5 or 6 years or so, and I've never managed before, and I've taken up vaping. And the first time I was like, "You've taken up what?" And you hear this a few times and think, well, what do these people know that I don't as a doctor? I need to look into this. And it was around about that time that the West Australian Health Department prosecuted a retailer for selling nicotine and fined him $45,000. And it's like, you can buy nicotine in cigarettes, which is harmful for you. You can buy them in patches or gums or sprays, variably at the chemist or the supermarket. Nicotine is not the problem. Why are we doing this? Why are we stopping smokers going to, as the UK government has determined, Public Health UK, at least 95% less harmful? So we are an outlier. New Zealand is going about it the right way. The EU, Japan, Canada, United States, as Matt Canavan said, we're sitting with Turkey as the outliers.
Look, I mean, the vaping thing, people are saying, what's all this vaping stuff? It's been preoccupying a lot of discussion over the last week. I mean, we talked about it last Friday night on the program, and I'm glad to get you on tonight. We'd organised it early in the week, but either way, Greg Hunt has amended this. But this is about using a certain amount, a regulated amount, a prescribed amount of nicotine as a substitute for all of the bad and harmful stuff that, agreeably, is put the carcinogens that are in cigarettes. And to get people, the 13.8% of people who are still smoking, to look for something alternate. Obviously, the big tobacco people wouldn't like vaping.
Well, that's interesting too, Gary, because a lot of the opponents of vaping in Australia try to dress it up as some sort of big tobacco conspiracy. It's like it's really in the interests of big tobacco to get people off their products. Now, it has to be said that tobacco manufacturers have moved into the vaping space and are now making these products. And they're doing it because that's what people internationally want. But, you know, that's a good, not a bad thing. If people can be part of the solution rather than the problem, that's better. And it is for smokers who are giving up smoking. Now, we get these figures quoted about youth vaping, and there's moral panic about an epidemic of vaping. So they ask teenagers, have you vaped in the last, 30 or 60 days? And some of them might have done it once, never done it again, but they're classed as a statistic. Youth will experiment. They'll experiment with cigarettes, with alcohol, with a whole host of substances, and they may experiment with vaping. The substantive point is that in every country where vaping is legal and supported, youth smoking is declining and adult smoking rates are declining, and they're declining faster than in Australia. Australia's smoking rates have not changed much since 2013, despite the fact that we have the highest per stick cigarette prices of anywhere in the world, and we've had plain packaging, and yet no reduction in smoking. But in countries where they have vaping, people are getting off the cigarettes and onto vaping. So we really, we not only do we need to, this draconian approach that was coming in has been deferred, it doesn't need to be on prescription. In every other country, you can buy it as easily or not easily as cigarettes. And we shouldn't make it harder for people to access a less harmful option. So we just need to catch up to the rest of the free world. And the minister's listened this time, and full credit to him. And there's hundreds of thousands of smokers and their families who will be saying thank you tonight. But, this is not the end of it. We can't just introduce these regulations in 6 months' time. We need a regime that's similar to New Zealand's.
Yeah, well, the 28 backbenchers need to get to work with people who know stuff about it and get on with it, get some common sense approach, and whether they tax it or whatever they do to it is all part of that discussion going forward.